Welcome to another episode of Preferred Walk-On, PFF's college football show. I'm your host, Max Chadwick, with a new and improved co-host today in Trevor Sikkema. So, Trev, I know you're filling in for the PFF NFL pod because Sam Monson is sick. Well, Dalton Wassman does not have that same excuse. He's actually in New Orleans celebrating Mardi Gras right now, probably making Hangover Part 4, honestly. So, doesn't have quite the excuse that Sam Monson does, man, but I appreciate you taking time out and joining me today, man.
That's a way better excuse, by the way. Like, okay, like having COVID, being in New Orleans, maybe getting COVID. I don't know. Just
probably, yeah.
Everywhere. But if there's a place to get it, I guess it'd be New Orleans. No, but dude, it's great to be with you. I had to give a shout out to you. This is one of the best college football podcast names in the business. I don't think I've told you that before. But every time I see like, Preferred Walk-On's a sick podcast name. Every time I see the link and everything. So you did good with that one. So I appreciate you having me on the show, man.
I hate to break the news to you. I think we're in the process of changing it to PFF's college football show.
Oh, man. Now, it makes sense. You know, company brand, you got to be able to do it. But, man.
I know. They told me that, and I was like, okay, I'm happy we're being branded like that, but at the same time, I was like, man, Preferred Walk-On was an elite name. So you might be one of the last episodes. Eli sent me some of the graphics earlier for the new name. This might be one of the last episodes under PWO, man. So
we're all right. So it's vintage. It's
cool.
It's
vintage. Exactly.
I'm good with it. We can stick with the vintage look. I can always look back on this fondly, and so no, that'll be all right then if I'm one of the last ones.
So Trev, you're PFF's lead draft analyst. You've been doing this for a long time, man. So what I wanted to do and kind of frame this as a draft video, the term generational gets thrown around in the NFL draft way too loosely, and there's very few guys ever that has actually applied to it because generations are like 20 to 30 years, and we're using this for like every 3 years for these guys. So I wanted to go over every position, look at your top player at every position in this year's draft, and go over how generational they are, and maybe look at when the last time another prospect at that position was better than this year's top guy. So I'm excited to get into this with you, man, and I think we're gonna have a fun conversation with the first one, which is quarterback. You have Caleb Williams at number one, the USC quarterback. Not a very hot take there. Looking at your past top quarterbacks, Bryce Young, number one overall in 2023. Desmond Ridder, number 43 overall in 2022 in that vaunted 2022 quarterback class. Caleb Williams, how generational is he? Like, what are we talking about here? Is it Trevor Lawrence that we got to go back to? Is it Joe Burrow? Or even go back to Andrew Luck, John Elway? Like, what are we talking about here for Caleb Williams?
Yeah, so for Caleb, I think he's talented enough where this exercise should have been a lot further back for him. But unfortunately, you go back to it. It's hard to say that he'd be more generational than Trevor Lawrence was in 2021, right? Because that was somebody who, from his freshman year at Clemson, we knew that he was going to be a number one overall pick someday, and we kind of touted him as the next great quarterback in the NFL before he even got to his sophomore year of college. And so when I think about Lawrence, especially, I mean, you got to think about this. We're talking pre-draft evaluation. So Lawrence, it's still been a little bit more of a slow burn than some of us thought it was going to be, although it does make sense looking at the offense that he played in at Clemson. So I think the answer to the question, if we're going to stay true to it, is he's the best quarterback prospect since Trevor Lawrence.
Okay.
But you go a little bit further here. We can go a little bit further because I got the draft history up right now. Joe Burrow, 2022. Obviously, Burrow was phenomenal as well. He was kind of a interesting story because he was not really seen as a first round or number one overall pick on a quarterback until that last season when he absolutely was. So I think Burrow, as a final scouting report, probably higher than Williams, but probably just a little bit. So you got those two guys there, but I would have taken Caleb over Kyler Murray. I'd have taken Caleb over Baker Mayfield. I'd have taken Caleb over Mitchell Trubisky, over Jared Goff, probably over Jameis Winston, over Blake Bortles, over EJ Manuel, certainly. And then you get to Andrew Luck at 2020 or at 2012. So I think we're really just looking at Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, and then outside of that, you got to go, 12 years. You got to go 12 years in the past and get all the way down to Andrew Luck. So that'd be my answer to that one.
Okay, so that's pretty good, man. Honestly, I got Caleb, I think, is close with Burrow. I agree with you. I think Lawrence was a better prospect. And then you look back, man, Andrew Luck. That was like the first year I've ever remembered the NFL draft, honestly, the Andrew Luck year. And Andrew Luck, I remember it being talked about like crazy high. As
he was the most sure thing of sure thing. And Andrew Luck was awesome at the NFL level. It was simply just injuries that kind of ruined what I think could have been a Hall of Fame long career for him, honestly.
Okay, so Caleb Williams, the answer is best since Trevor Lawrence, but honestly, I mean, you look back at past classes, it's probably Trevor, Luck, and maybe, like you said, there's only a couple other guys that even are in a contention with Caleb Williams. So that's pretty good for him. Running back. This is a pretty weak running back class, man. Right now, Jonathan Brooks from Texas is your number 1 back. He's number 50 overall. Funnily enough, your last 2 number 1 RB1s were both from Texas. Jer'Zhan Robinson, you had number 2 overall. Breece Hall the year before. So Big 12 dominating your running back 1 rankings. 38 overall in 2022. Obviously, Bijan Robinson's going to be your answer here, but do you think this is one of the weaker RB1s and maybe even weaker running back classes that we've had in recent memory?
Yeah, and I think I think the times of where we're at go into that a little bit. Like, I try to think, man, if we only go back a couple of years, like I'm looking at this 2021 draft, right?
Right.
It's Javonte Williams, it's Travis Etienne, Najee Harris ended up being RB1 that year at number 24 overall. You know, I don't know. Those guys had longer careers in college than Jonathan Brooks did, but like Brooks probably would have been up there around where Javonte Williams would have been picked. So this year, if he was fully healthy, I should say, because the problem is that he's coming off an ACL tear. And then what are you going to do with a running back who's coming off of an ACL tear? You're probably not going to draft him anywhere within the top 50. So that clouds that a little bit, but it is one of the weaker years. You know, when I talk about when the first running back could come off the board, I go back to, God, which year was the Bishop Sankey draft? That was 2014.
Yep.
Sankey comes off the board as
that was your
RB1.
Bucks, right? Did they take, or the Titans took him?
No, Titans took him.
Right.
The Bucks took Charles Sims in that draft, who was also not good.
Yep.
But 54 was when the first running back came off the board, and that's the last time that RB1 has come off the board outside of the top 50. Mm-hmm. Feels like we could have that again. But I do think it's a little bit unfair because people go, oh, you know, I don't have a running back ranked in the top 50, top 65. Some people are going to tell you top 75. If Brooks was fully healthy, if he plays out this whole year, Brooks is a top 50 pick to me. So if he recovers and if recovery's go well, we've seen backs get back from ACL injuries before, I could see a team around the top 50 still taking this guy. I think he is that talented to do so, but the injury makes it feel like, yeah, the RB run is going to start a lot later this year than it has in years past.
Dude, all right, I want to ask you this question too. This is not this year's draft, but who do you think is a better prospect, Bijan or Saquon Barkley?
Oh, man.
Don't break my heart as a Penn State fan here, Trevor. I think the answer is honestly Bijan, though, if I had to be honest.
I think the answer is Bijan simply because of the footwork.
Yeah, dude.
Like, the dude's feet are just so lightning quick, and vision is the most important trait for me when it comes to a running back. That, and like I've said on Twitter, running extremely pissed off every time you touch the football. Mm-hmm. But Bijan's feet were just, they're so light, they're so crisp. I think I would have gone Bijan over Saquon.
All right.
As much as he was unbelievable coming out of Penn State. Because you got to, every time we have these conversations like this, I try to put myself back in the shoes of like, okay, don't judge what he has been with the Giants. Don't judge, okay, he wasn't worth being taken in the top 3. Like,
yeah,
judge what he was coming out of Penn State. And he was seen as a generational kind of player, but I think I would actually take Bijan.
Dude, Bijan was stupid good. And just to kind of preview the 2025 draft, Trevor, I think it's going to be one of the strongest running back classes I can remember, man. It is stupid.
You know more than me. I'm only tunnel vision into the 2024 class. But I've seen that you've already done kind of like the legwork and getting guys up for the rankings about next year. So this running back class is legit?
Dude, so I looked up the stat. So obviously rushing yards does not, tell the whole story, but of the 15 leading FBS rushers from this past season, 12 of them are coming back to school.
Yeah.
Dude, it is, and that's not even accounting for like 5 of the players in my top 10 list. So
do you have a favorite? Who's your favorite?
Ollie Gordon, the Oklahoma.
Oh, the Oklahoma State
dude. He's good. Quinshon Judkins is pretty nasty too. I mean,
Quinshon sick.
Travion Henderson, would he be like RB2 for you in this draft? And he's coming back to school too.
I was lower on Trayvon than a lot of people were. I think I probably still would have had Trayvon at least RB3, but like no higher than that, because I like Jalen Wright from Tennessee. I think he's got explosive speed. The vision is still kind of a work in progress, but he's light on experience, so that's understandable. He's one hell of a pass protector. He's the best pass protecting running back in this draft, no question about it. And like I said, he kind of gives you that long speed that a lot of the other guys in this class just don't have. So I would say that Brooks would still be my RB1. I'd probably have Jalen Wright as RB2. And then Travion, now that I've seen a lot more of these guys, even for as much as he was kind of disappointing to me compared to the hype, I think he would have likely come in at like RB3, RB4 for me.
Dude, he was RB6 in my college rankings. So it's like, it's stupid, dude. I'm telling you right now, I think right now that is the best position in college football next year is running back. It is stupid.
Do you have who do you have? Who's the 5 ahead of him? Just so I can learn names.
Well, Todd,
I don't get to do that very often on shows. Like normally I'm the person who's like bringing names to the table, and now I know that you're the expert of kind of like what's coming next because you follow college football.
Marion Hampton, he led the nation in yards after contact. He was number 3 from Ollie 1, Judkins 2, Jaden Ott from Cal. He's nasty too. I had him 4. And then Taj Brooks could have been in this year's draft, so you probably watched him a little bit. The Texas Tech back, he's the 230-pound monster. He's a tank.
Yes,
he's a tank.
Okay, all right. Now I know the names. This is
and
good.
Dude, Donovan Edwards is coming back too. Like just like so many guys that just
I know. Yeah.
So we'll see. All right, this position will be fun because I think this one we're going to have to go deep for. It is wide receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr., you have number 2 overall. Funnily enough, so your RB1 of the last 2 years has been Texas. Wide receiver 1 in the last 2 years has been Ohio State. And tight end 1 for your last 2 years has also been the same school. But for wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba last year was your number 1 receiver, and Jameson Williams the year before. I would guess that Marvin Harrison Jr. would be number 1 out of all 3 of those names. So how far are we going back? Are we going back to, was Jamar Chase better? Sammy Watkins, AJ Green, Julio Jones, maybe even Calvin Johnson in 07? Like, how far are we talking here for MHJ?
It's very hard to find holes in Marvin Harrison Jr.'s game. I was having this conversation with Steve Palazzolo this morning, actually, and wide receiver is an interesting position because for as much as Marvin Harrison Jr. is extremely well-rounded and well above average at basically everything, Xavier Worthy's faster than him.
Yeah.
Keon Coleman's stronger than him. Ladd McConkey is quicker than him, right? And so, like, you can name all of these other wide receivers who maybe in one area might be better than him, but I still think the well-roundedness and just how high the floor is for Marvin Harrison Jr., I would have liked him better than Jack Smith and Jigba for sure.
Yeah.
Better than Jameson Williams. I think I ended up having Jalen Waddle as wide receiver 1 in 2021.
Wow, okay.
So I would have, and they were right there. Like, I thought Waddle and Chase were right there. So I would have had Marvin Harrison in 2021. He would have been wide receiver 1 2022 over Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs. 2019 would have been wide receiver 1. 2018, 2017, 2016 easily. 2015, I think, he would have been wide receiver 1, although, like, when Amari Cooper was coming out of college, there's a reason why he went 4th overall. I mean, everybody just thought he was so uncoverable. So that's the Cooper. It's a conversation with what Amari Cooper was coming out of school. God, 2014 was loaded, but
Sammy Watkins at Clemson was nasty. I think Marvin might beat him out, though.
But it's not just Sammy. Like, Mike Evans goes 7, Odell goes 12.
Yeah, that's true.
Devontae Adams goes 53 in that draft, by the way. That one's tough. The 2014 group's unbelievably talented. Obviously, future All-Pros basically everywhere you look. He would have been wide receiver 1 in 2013, 2012. Although Justin Blackmon was, I mean, what he was at
Blackmon was, oh my God,
just insane.
Yeah.
And then I think you get to 2011. So for Marvin Harrison Jr., he's basically wide receiver 1 in every year other than maybe not 2014. And then you get to 2011 with Julio Jones and AJ Green. And I think that's probably where the conversation stops. So an easy an easy decade of him being the wide receiver one in basically every other draft class.
Dude, yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. is special, man. And so is this next guy who I already wrote about saying he's the greatest tight end ever in college football history. I'm not too much of a draft guy like you, but I would argue he might be the best tight end in college football history. I'm excited to see what you think about Brock Bowers here. So you have him number 6 overall. Again, same school last year, too. Darnell Washington, you had your number 1 tight end, 16th overall, and Trey McBride the year before at 53 overall. I think the question really becomes him, Kyle Pitts, and maybe if he's better than Kyle Pitts, maybe Vernon Davis in 06, Kellen Winslow in 04. Brock Bowers, is he the GOAT NFL draft tight end prospect?
So I'm going to say no, but only because he's smaller than a lot of other tight ends. And that's okay because in today's era, he's a tight end, but he's really like a move tight end. You know, he can play on the line of scrimmage, sure, and I think he can hold up well as a blocker, but he plays a lot as a wing back. He'll play in the slot. He could play on the outside. So he's more of just kind of like a move tight end and a flexible tight end than like a true traditional. He's going to show up at the combine, and I think he's going to be around 6'3".
Yeah.
And I think he's going to, he better weigh in between 240 and 245 pounds, because if he weighs less than 240, you're extremely low percentile for the tight end position. 6'3" is already small for the tight end position. It's just massive dudes. So I just say that to kind of give context to all of it, because I think Kyle Pitts was regarded and will be regarded as a better prospect coming out than Brock Bowers. He goes number 4 overall, so he's still within that conversation. But you start scrolling 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, which was an interesting class with O.J. Howard and Evan Ingram and David Njoku. But I think Bowers was more productive and would have been tight end 1, no question, over all of them. 16, 15, 14. Eric Ebron was interesting because he was good enough to go 10 overall, but
he ran a 4.3, right, at the combine? Wasn't that like his big thing?
He was crazy, actually.
It was like a 4. It might have been a 4.4, but I remember his 40 was like unbelievable for a tight end.
No way it was a 4.3, or I'm gonna lose my. No. Okay, so listen, he's 6'4", 250 pounds. Both of those numbers for the tight end, bigger than Brock Bowers. They're both the 38th percentile. So they're well below the 50th percentile, and he is significantly bigger, I think, than Brock Bowers was. He ran a 4.6 flat, which
it's way off then. Gee, okay, never mind.
You were way off, but listen, 4.6 flat is the 88th percentile for tight ends.
Yeah.
So it's still like that. The reason why you have that memory of him running a crazy fast 40 is because for a tight end, he did run a crazy fast 40. But I think you pick Brock Bowers over him. 13 was Eifert over him. 12 was Fleener over him. Kyle Rudolph over him. 2010 is kind of interesting because it's like Jermaine Gresham's tight end 1 in that class off the board, but Rob Gronkowski goes 42nd overall.
Yeah, right.
Tight end of all time. And then later in that class, you had Jimmy Graham go 95. So I think it's something probably around there. You've got to go back to at least 2010, if not before, to find a prospect that it was as highly regarded as Brock Bowers is outside of Kyle Pitts.
Okay, outside of Kyle Pitts. I'm a huge Brock Bowers guy, man. So I still think I think he's a GOAT college tight end, but you're better than me for prospect wise. But man, I think Bowers, man, like a George Kittle, something like that, he's gonna be a monster. I'm of the belief, and I know you might not subscribe to it, but I'm of the belief that Jim Harbaugh should take him number 5 overall and just cook from there.
If he thinks that Bowers holds up well enough on the line of scrimmage, I think that he definitely could do that because he loves to get tight ends involved.
Yeah.
But if he does, the issue becomes if you don't think he's going to hold up well enough on the line of scrimmage to be a true every situation tight end, then do you just take Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze? Yeah. Like at that point, if you don't believe that he's like a full-time inline player and he's more of a receiver, are you just going to draft a receiver instead? So that's, I think, the conversation that you have. But Bowers, to me, is within that conversation, which puts him in the same area as Kyle Pitts. But I do think Pitts, when he was coming out, was translation wise to the NFL regarded higher than Brock Bowers just because there's a little bit of concern over the size.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, this next position I actually think is pretty interesting too, which is offensive tackle when talking about the best since whenever. So Joe Alt right now, you're number 1 at 5 overall. Peter Skoronski year before also at 5 overall. Charles Cross in 2022 for Mississippi State at number 3 overall. Is Joe Alt the best out of those 3 guys? And then if he is he better than a guy like maybe Penei Sewell in 2021, or is that kind of where the conversation stops for Joe Alt?
I think that's probably where it stops, is that 2021 year. I wouldn't sit here and call Joe Alt generational, but I think he's a really damn good prospect. We've had some good offensive linemen come through over the last couple of years. And that 2022 class, I know Ike Ekwonu didn't have a great year this past year. Evan Neal certainly did not have a great year. And Charles Cross has been a little up and down. He's been good enough to be a starter, obviously, and I think he's been fine. I think they made a good investment with him. But you're taking Joe Alt, I think, over all of those guys, even pre-draft, for as much as we like them. Sewell is, to me, where if we're playing this game as true as it's supposed to be, that's where it stops, because I would have had Penei Sewell above Joe Alt because he's just rare power, rare movement skills. And I think you saw that this past year. He was one of the best offensive tackles, if not the best offensive tackle in the NFL in 2023. So that, to me, is where that conversation ends. And, I wonder where he would have stacked up in that 2020 class, because that 2020 class had Andrew Thomas, it had Tristan Wirfs, it had Mekhi Becton, it had Jedrick Wills. Alt could have been OT1 in that for some people, but yeah, I think he's probably in the mix a little bit there. So again, for the sake of the game, it's not a generational thing, but I think you go back to 2021 and you say Penei Sewell was better than him.
Well, based off many analysts' definition of generational, he is, because it's 3 years. So
yeah, correct. Yeah. Right, of course.
3 years is generation,
as everyone knows.
For NFL drafts. So yeah, Joe Alt, man, he's special, honestly. But I agree with you. I remember that Penei Sewell. People made YouTube highlight videos of Penei Sewell. That was like the first time I've ever seen a YouTube highlight video of an offensive lineman. Like, that's how special this guy was, man.
And it probably clicked well.
Dude, it did. It got like millions of views, man. Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned it. If you're, being talked about in the same vein, even as Penei Sewell, who's actually PFF's highest graded tackle this year, you're doing something right. So all right, so Joe Alt, 2021, the answer is Penei Sewell. Jackson Powers Johnson, your number 1 interior offensive lineman here at number 22 overall, and Steve Avila the year before was your number 1, the guard from TCU at 41 overall. Tyler Linderbaum, the center from Iowa, at 20 overall in 2022. I don't believe JPJ was better than Tyler Linderbaum. I remember he almost broke the PFF grading scale Linderbaum did in his last couple years. But what do you think about this interior offensive lineman from Oregon and where he stacks up basically all time?
I like Jackson Powers Johnson. I really do. But, if you also want to go back to last year, and since Skoronski got moved to interior immediately.
Fair.
Yeah. I would take Skoronski over Jackson Powers Johnson, and I'd also take Tyler Linderbaum over Jackson Powers Johnson. So, again, for the sake of the exercise of what we're doing, not a Quentin Nelson type player, right? Not somebody who's like, whoa, we got this dude, just does not come around very often. Good football player, starting football player, could be a Pro Bowler potentially, but there have been other interior offensive linemen, even as recent as last year in Peter Skoronski, that I would have taken over JPJ.
That's fair. JPJ, though, great senior ball. I know you were there. And, unbelievable tape this past year. I think he led the nation in pass blocking and run blocking grade for centers, which is just stupid. So
really good football player, no question about it. But there have been some good interior offensive linemen that have come through over the last couple of years.
Right. You think JPJ's a lock for the first round at this point?
Yeah, so the only reason why I have any sort of hesitation about it is because I've talked to some people who have told me he might have some previous injuries that might be still kind of like lingering around, that might get flagged at the combine. Now, this person was even saying, like, I don't know really how severe it is. This is kind of just what they've been told. If it's something that's severe enough to where they go, yeah, that was still flagged at the combine, maybe you don't take him in the first round. But from what we saw this past year on tape and what we saw at the Senior Bowl, performance alone, yeah, this dude's a first rounder.
All right, fair. All right, so move over to the defensive side of the ball. Don't know if we'll have too many generational conversations here, but for D tackle, Jer'Zhan Newton, my guy, number 10 overall from Illinois. Jalen Carter the year before at number 4 overall. Devontae Wyatt from Georgia at number 10 overall in 2022. So Jer'Zhan Newton, I don't think you would say was better than Jalen Carter, but would you say he's been one of the better DT1s that we've had in recent memory?
Well, he's great, and honestly, I feel bad because I should have warned you about this. This is a little bit dated. I'd actually have Byron Murphy as my interior defensive lineman number 1 now.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
And I like Jer'Zhan Newton still. He is still, I think, a late first, early second round type of interior defensive lineman. But Murphy, I think, is going to put on an absolute show at the combine.
Yeah,
and he is a monster against the run. And he is still figuring it out, has some really impressive flashes when it comes to pass rushing. The hand usage, I mean, the hands are heavy, fast, violent. He's got a great first step for one gap penetration. He is excellent at holding up against double teams. I mean, this dude him and Chris Jenkins Jr., I mean, like, they barely move an inch, man. And that's talking about being a little bit lighter in size. I wonder if he's going to put on even a little bit more weight even. Murphy, that is, and play a little bit closer to 310. And if he does, man, just the strength is going to be crazy. So I'd actually have Murphy as DT1 in this class, but I think the conversation is still the same. Neither of those guys are anywhere near the type of prospect that Jalen Carter was last year. You even go the year before. I had Devontae Wyatt because I like Devontae Wyatt a lot, and I was a little bit worried about Jordan Davis. But Jordan Davis, for the caliber athlete he was at his size, is pretty unbelievable. So if you put him as that DT1 in that class, you're probably taking Jordan Davis over Byron Murphy II just because he's just it's insanely rare what he does at his size. But you know, if I'm taking Byron Murphy, I'm stacking him against the 2021 class. I'm taking him over Christian Barmore, who was the first one taken. Man, Derek Brown is the first interior defensive lineman in 2020. I think that's a conversation right there. I think both of those guys as prospects were right there.
Interesting.
And then Quinnen Williams at 2019. You're taking Quinnen over Byron and Jer'Zhan for sure.
So Jer'Zhan was number 10 on your big board. Do you know where Byron will be on your big board? Will he be in the top 10 range, or be like top 15 or?
Yeah, he'll be. I don't know where his final grade is going to be for me because I'm updating the board this weekend as we are getting close to the release of the PFF draft guide. I think, to be safe, I'll say I got to believe he's going to be top 15, but he might be around that 10 area as well.
Yeah, I forgot to shout it out. The PFF draft guide, I think, coming out combine week, right?
Let's go, baby.
Dude,
that's the plan right now. It's a lot. Dude, there are so many people behind the scenes who I'm doing a lot of the analysis for it, but there's so many people behind the scenes who are working on the graphics and the editing and getting everything together, who are working so hard to make that happen. So it's definitely just not a me thing, shouting out them as well. So they're kind of going through that as well. But we are hoping that at the beginning of Combine Week, we get to fire off the links for that bad boy.
Dude, I think the PFF draft guide is the best thing we put out every year, man. So I cannot wait for this year's copy. Make sure you get it at pff.com when it drops, because it's going to be special. But going to the Edge class, I hope your Edge 1 is still the same, because I feel like everyone's Edge 1 changes every single week in this class. But right now, according to the PFF big board right now, you have Dallas Turner at number 14 overall. Again, last year, another Alabama Edge at number 1 was Will Anderson Jr. at number 3 overall. Kayvon Thibodeau, number 2 overall from Oregon in 2022. So, first of all, is Dallas Turner still your Edge 1? And do you think this is maybe one of the weaker Edge 1s that we've had probably in recent memory? Even though it's a really good Edge class overall, the depth is really good, but do you think the top end talent maybe is just lacking that we've had in recent years?
Yeah, who did I have as Edge 1 last year? Oh, it's okay. I'm looking at drafthistory.com, and I'm looking at defensive ends.
Oh, and they had linebacker for Will Anderson Jr.?
Yeah, they got linebacker for Will Anderson. So I'm looking at this, like the first defensive end technically that was off the board was Tyree Wilson, and then it was Lucas Van Ness, and I was like, Lord knows I didn't have those guys as Edge 1 last year, because I was not high on either of them. I think Lucas Van Ness a second round grade. I gave Tyree Wilson like late second, early third. He went 7th, which is wild to me. But I don't know if I want to say that it's weaker. There's just a little bit. It's not as proven as probably what I'll say.
Okay.
I think it's a conversation between Dallas Turner, between Jared Verse, and between Laiatu Latu for who might be the most productive edge rusher from this group. But all of them have something that's holding them back a little bit. With Verse, love his power profile, super powerful dude, really dense. Bull rush is fantastic, bases everything around that bull rush, and he can really get after the passer and hold the line of scrimmage. But the finesse part of his game is still kind of a work in progress. And you wonder, okay, is it ever going to be something that's a really a calling card of his game? Turner, I love the progress for him. The previous year, I felt like all he could really do was a speed rush and a long arm. And this year, he's got the speed rush and the long arm, but that's just where his pass rush plan begins. Put on a little extra weight. He got stronger. I think the pressure numbers were really good for him. And so I think he's a good player. He's just still kind of figuring it out. And then Latu, I mean, you've seen the grades. Dude. Like a 96.4 pass rush grade over the last 2 years, over 23.4% win percentage as a pass rusher. He's nuts. But the problem is, his arm length is like 13th percentile, and he's going to test like a below 50th percentile athlete in basically all the athletic categories. So the NFL is not going to draft him very high. All that to say, I certainly wouldn't take any of these guys over Will Anderson. 2022 is interesting because, I had Kayvon as edge or as my number 2 overall guy in that class, but Kayvon and Dallas Turner are very similar. So I actually think it's kind of a similar conversation between the two of those guys, despite me having Dallas Turner a little bit outside of my top 10 and having Kayvon all the way up at number 2. 2021, Jalen Phillips, I think, was my edge 1. He ends up being the first edge rusher off the board. I probably would have had Dallas Turner over Phillips just because of the injury history. And then the previous year was Chase Young. I mean, I wasn't going to have Chase Young that year. So, yeah, it's an interesting conversation the way you look at it there. But I don't want to say it's one of the weaker groups. It's just not as proven as it has been in years past.
I think that's fair. And, yeah, I mentioned that Latu grade. I actually saw he has the highest graded season we've ever seen by a Power 5 player, ever. Blake Corum last year, 96.2, and then Kyle Pitts, Chase Young, and Quinnen Williams at a 96 grade, and Latu is 96.3 this year. So
insane,
dude. He got slept on. He deserved a lot more awards than he got. I know you talked to him right at the Senior Bowl. He seemed like a cool guy, right?
Dude, he's awesome. He was great. I got to chat with him because he was sitting out that third day. I kind of went up to him. I was just like, hey, man, you good? Like, I need you to be good. I need you to have not done anything out there. And he's like, no, I'm fine. He's like, somebody kind of ran into my leg a little weird. And my quad's kind of sore today. So I'm just not trying to push it, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Obviously, you don't want to get hurt or push it there. Plus, he was so dominant the first 2 days anyways. But, yeah, he talked to me about, I asked him about the injury with the neck and everything. And I asked him straight up. I was like, did you actually think that your career was over when Washington medically retired you? And he's like, no, like not for a second.
Wow.
And I was like, what happened there? And he's like, well, it's like I took a hit weird, and obviously, it was something with my neck, just wasn't right. And I ended up getting looked at by the doctors, and they kind of came back to me and they're like, all right, we're going to medically retire you. And he's like, whoa. He's like, what do you mean? And he's like, yeah, we got a press conference for it tomorrow. We don't think that you can play anymore, like all this. And he's like, oh, okay. So he takes the year off, but the whole time he was like still training. He ended up getting the surgery on his neck, and then the surgeon who operated on him was UCLA's preferred surgeon. So it was an easy connection there because they trusted him that he got the surgery done well. And I got a good buddy of mine who works at UCLA, and I asked him about Latu, and he's like, we don't limit him at all. He's like, yeah, it's going to show up on combine evals just because he's had work done, but he's like, we don't limit him at all during practice, during games, during anything. And so it's been 2 years of him fully healthy. And so he's just a pass rush specialist, man. The way that he approaches the game is so cerebral, and that's going to play at the NFL level.
Do you think if Washington still had Latu, Braylon Trice coming off that edge, do they win the national championship over Michigan? Probably not, right? It was kind of a blowout, but still, man, that's like the best edge duo I can remember in a long time, honestly.
I don't know about national championship, but I mean, he'd certainly help for sure.
Dude, watching his tape, it looks like a guy who was medically retired, and I mean that in the best way possible. It was like that game was taken away from him, and like he's very clearly worked his ass off to never have that happen again, and like he wants to be the best player possible now because, like you said, the game was almost taken away from him for good, so he very clearly works his ass off now. So yeah,
and that was the way that he approached it too when he talked with me about. He said he watched so much TJ Watt and Max Crosby tape like while he was not able to play, and there's no question he hit the ground running when he got to UCLA. So, I think that he is one of the best pass rushers in the country. Again, I think the measurables, the NFL just always gets a little bit freaked out when you're a little bit smaller, a little bit slower, because it is a big person's game. It's a fast person's game. So, anytime you put those into question, the NFL doesn't love it.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to linebacker class now. This one is going to be interesting to see because Jer'Zhan Cooper is your LB1, 62 overall. Last year, you had Drew Sanders from Arkansas, 28 overall. And the year before, Devin Lloyd from Utah, number 22 overall. So it's actually pretty rare to have an NFL draft where a linebacker doesn't go in the first round. So I guess the better question to ask you rather than the whole generational thing is how does this class stack up? Is this one of the weaker linebacker classes we've had in recent memory?
Yeah, but yeah, it kind of feels that way. So, again, from more recent tape dives and getting into more of our analytics and just taking a look at more tape on these players, I think Peyton Wilson's LB1 in this class.
Interesting. Okay.
I actually don't think it's close. Like, I think he's the best linebacker in this class. The issue is that he tore his, I think he had a knee injury in high school his senior year. Mm-hmm. He tore his ACL his first year at NC State. In 2021, he missed this big portion of the season because he had a dislocated shoulder and a torn labrum. And it's like, dude, you play a position that's so physical, it's really hard to draft that. But Jer'Zhan Cooper would be my LB2 in this class. And so both of those guys, because of the injury history of Wilson and because Cooper is super athletic, but he's just more of a downhill linebacker right now. He's kind of like of that Devin White mold. And I know Devin White went 5 overall, but he shouldn't have. I mean, just straight up.
Yeah.
You get into the conversation where I don't think linebacker is going to get picked until the second round. So I guess to your point, like it is one of the weaker points in this class. And I guess it's one of the weaker points overall because I'm trying, like I'd have Jack Campbell above both of those guys pretty easily from last year's draft. Mm-hmm. Drew Sanders, I like Peyton Wilson more than I liked Drew Sanders, so he would have been above Drew Sanders, but I'd have Campbell above both of those guys. Quay Walker, Devin Lloyd, I'd have at least had Devin Lloyd over Peyton Wilson. Maybe Quay Walker. I think he's probably in that conversation. Quay Walker's rise, like during the latter half of draft season, was kind of crazy to me. 2021.
That was Micah. Okay. Micah wasn't really a linebacker. This would be like Zaven Collins,
he's an edge. And like Collins in that class, Jamin Davis in that class. So like it's tricky, right? Because both those guys go first round. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah goes in the second. I'd have had JOK above.
Dude, I love JOK at Notre Dame.
No, so did I. And I thought the Jamin Davis love was
crazy. It was all combine, really. Yeah.
Super great athlete, but maybe we do end up having the same conversation about Jer'Zhan Cooper. Like maybe Jer'Zhan Cooper does get talked about with some of these crazy athletic linebackers that end up going in the first round that maybe should not have, right? I mean, you look at Kenneth Murray as well. Patrick Queen was like this. So obviously Devin White goes number 5 overall for a reason. Kind of going on a tangent now, but I would have had Jack Campbell over the two guys that I have as number 1 in this class, but I'd have Peyton Wilson at 1, and I'd have Jer'Zhan Cooper at number 2.
All right. Fair enough. The cornerback class is pretty interesting, too. There's obviously a lot of different names people have as CB1. Right now, you have Cooper DeJean, the Iowa corner, 8 overall on your big board. Devin Witherspoon the year before was 6 overall, and then Derek Stingley Jr. You had number 1 overall in that 2022 class, which I love. So DeJean, obviously, a really, really talented corner, great tape, super athlete, too. Where do you think he stacks up, and where do you think maybe other corners stack up when you look at recent memory?
Yeah, I like this corner class a lot. Terrion Arnold's in this class.
Right.
Quinyon Mitchell's in this class. Kool-Aid McKinstry's in this class. Nate Wiggins is in this class. Really good corners. But I think Devon Witherspoon would still be my CB1 if he were to be in this year's group. Then Christian Gonzalez would kind of be in that conversation near the top. But I think I'd have at least Devon because I loved Witherspoon last year.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Stingley, obviously I had him number 1 overall in 2022. I thought he was phenomenal going back to his freshman year at LSU. So I would have had Stingley.
Even above. Sauce too, right? Probably over him.
What'd you say?
Even Sauce Gardner too, probably over all these guys too.
Yeah, probably. I probably would have had Sauce above all of these guys, which is really saying something because, again, I think this class is really good. And man, 2021, J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain.
Yeah.
I think I actually had Caleb Farley as CB1 in that class just because I did not pay attention to the injury history for him. But I mean, J.C. Horn and Patrick Surtain, you could have easily said would be CB1 in this group as well. Jeff Okudah, I liked. I wasn't the highest on Okudah. So I think that's probably a conversation there going back to the 2020 group. That's the first time you might be able to say these guys are that he would be, or those guys would be over CB1 in a different class. But man, we've had just looking at it now, we've had some good cornerback classes over the last couple of years, which is needed because as the wide receivers get better and more versatile, you got to have defensive backs to get in front of them and to cover them. So I think that this group is really nice. I like the cornerback class, but we've had some special dudes at the very top over the last couple of years.
The one I'm looking at right now that I think definitely there'll be multiple guys that'd be the CB1 is 2019. The first corner off the board was DeAndre Baker at 30 overall. I don't know if we'll ever get an NFL draft again where the first corner is taken at 30 overall. Like, that's crazy.
No, we won't. That would be crazy. I think we would have DeJean, Arnold, Mitchell, Wiggins, McKinstry, at least 5 over Baker. And I mean, even that, you're getting into conversations of like TJ Tampa's after that.
Right. Yeah.
I think
Rakestraw, right?
Rakestraw from Missouri. I think you could make an argument for over Baker. So yikes, that 20. Yikes. Was there anybody from that 20? Like even later?
Not that I saw.
Byron Murphy's all right.
Byron Murphy's pretty decent. Yeah, I liked him a lot at Washington. Rock Yassin. No, man, this is pretty rough. Honestly,
there's some safeties in that class that were okay, but
Jamel Dean. Jamel Dean was a third rounder that year. That's pretty. All right, that's good.
Jamel Dean's good.
Yeah,
Jamel Dean's good.
That's pretty good. Okay, so that's not. There's at least one solid corner in that class, but rounding it out with the safeties now. So Tyler Nubin is your safety one at 50 overall. Brian Branch last year was your number one safety at 18th overall. And then Kyle Hamilton, who I remember people talk about him as a generational prospect at 4 overall in 2022. So obviously Nubin well below Branch and Hamilton on your big board. So do you, like linebacker, is this like a safety class that, teams might be punting on this year, or what do you think about it?
It kind of feels like it is. It's a little unfair to stack Nubin up against Brian Branch because Branch, I always felt like was more of just like a slot defender type of a player, and Nubin is more of a true safety. Kyle Hamilton's like kind of the same way. Like Hamilton's just an alien. Mm-hmm. So for actual safeties that Nubin would go up against, who, by the way, I like Nubin. I think Nubin's getting slept on a little bit. A lot of people are just like, oh, this safety class is cheeks. Like, it's not very good. Like, you don't need to be drafted one. I gave Nubin a late first, early second round grade. Like, I think he's good. For example,
I like that.
The Packers need a safety. Mm-hmm. But they could need a safety real bad after free agency. If the Packers picked Tyler Nubin at 25, I'd go, all right, okay. It's like the beginning of his range, but I really wouldn't hate it, just to let you guys know that it's not like this safety class is just terrible. I think that Nubin can absolutely play, but who was the first true safety off the board last year?
Looking right now.
Is Brown the first?
I think it's Sidney Brown. Yeah.
So I like Sidney Brown, but I'd take Tyler Nubin over Sidney Brown.
Yeah.
And then the year before, if you take Hamilton out,
is Daxton Hill? It might be Lewis Cine. Daxton Hill is kind of a hybrid, I remember.
I was going to say, Dax Hill is sort of like a safety, but I did like Dax Hill a lot. I think it had Dax Hill 16th overall. So,
I mean, Lewis Cine might be the first true safety.
Who would?
Lewis Cine, maybe. Would you take?
I like Nubin more than I like Cine.
Mm-hmm.
I like Nubin more than I like Petrie. Yeah, I would have liked Nubin near the top of the bunch of the 2022 group. 2021.
Javon Holland. I love Javon Holland, dude.
Oh, yeah, Javon Holland was good.
Yeah.
I think I had Trayvon Merrick as my top safety in that group because I thought that Merrick could play single high.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I'd have Nubin right there in that conversation with those guys.
What about Xavier McKinney?
Probably a little bit higher, but
Xavier McKinney in 2020, would you have Nubin above him?
I like McKinney a good amount. Delbit's in that class too. Oh, Winfield was in that class.
Oh, Winfield's nasty. Another Minnesota guy.
I know. And Newbin waited his turn kind of behind Winfield for a little bit when he first got there.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't have him above McKinney or Winfield when they were coming out. Yeah. And then I would absolutely 100% have him as safety 1 in 2019.
You would? There's 2 first-round safeties right there. Darnell Savage, Jonathan Abram. 2 absolute studs.
Abram was way too boom or bust for me like when he was coming out.
Yeah.
I thought him getting drafted at 27 was way overdrafted.
Yeah.
And then
Savage.
I like Savage.
That was kind of a weird pick, too.
I don't want to be too I can't talk today.
Revisionist?
I don't want to look to, I don't want to look too hindsight with this one. There we go. I found a different word. So maybe we do say that Savage would have been in that same conversation with Newbin. I just feel like Newbin's getting way too slept on.
Yeah.
He's getting way too slept on in this class.
So I'm not going to ask you kickers and punters or anything like that. So I guess the best way to round this out, Trevor, who are the prospects in this draft that truly deserve the quote-unquote generational label?
I mean, there's probably only one, right? Well, there's 2 if you want to throw Brock Bowers into it, right? If you believe that Brock Bowers is just a unique one-of-one for his position, I think that it's fair to throw his name in there. But then Marvin Harrison Jr. is the other one, who I just think is in an exercise like the NFL draft where it's just a game of risk. Yeah. That's all you're doing. You're playing a game of risk. The level of a sure thing that it feels like Marvin Harrison Jr. feels a little unfair. Like it just feels like you're drafting this guy, and as long as he is healthy, he is a multiple All-Pro for you at some point throughout his career. He's got many 1,000-yard seasons. He's a difference maker in the postseason for you. And for as much as we all like to say those things out loud when projecting what these guys are, it's way more risky and way less guaranteed than we make it out to be. But with Harrison, the reason why I'd say that he could be quote-unquote generational, despite there being a lot of great wide receivers out there, is because of the floor and how high that is for him as a prospect. So I would say that there's 2. Caleb could obviously be special, but I'm not going to sit here and say that he's generational when we're literally in the era of Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I'm not allowed to do that. I cannot do that. So I can't throw him out there, but I will say Marvin Harrison Jr. and Brock Bowers are the potential generational type guys that we've got.
I love it, dude. So that's Tampa Bay Trevor Sikkema joining the podcast. Trev, I really appreciate taking the time out, man, and filling in for Dalton Wassman as he drinks his face off in New Orleans down there, man.
I appreciate you having me, man. It's I feel like it's been a long time coming for us to link up, so I appreciate it.
Of course, man. So obviously you host NFL Stock Exchange. You got the draft guide coming out right now. So what can we expect? I'm a diehard sex addict of NFL Stock Exchange. What can we expect from NFL SC over the next few weeks as we get into the combine and stuff like that?
No, it's going to be fun. Obviously, like this is a super busy time of year with us going to the combine. It's kind of like travel season right now. We're at the tail end of travel season for the draft. Dave Salfaro and I were at Shrine Bowl. We were at Senior Bowl. We were at Super Bowl week with a bunch of the other guys from PFF. And now we've got Indianapolis coming up in a week or so. And Indy is, to me, the best of all of those events. It really is. Like that's the time when you get to talk to a lot of people about what the league is really thinking. You get a good look at what's about to happen in free agency. And then from March to April, man, we're going to have so many of our final position rankings, our final mock drafts, what we think these teams are going to do. Obviously, heavy reaction to what's going to happen in free agency and how that's going to change the NFL draft landscape. I feel like we're going to have a major trade here happen over the next couple of weeks for one of those super desperate teams trying to get up, because Indianapolis and the Combine are often where a lot of these deals get done.
Yep.
I feel like we're going to see that happen over the next couple of weeks too, man. So we're covering it all on the NFL Stock Exchange channel, and appreciate you and everybody else listening to it.
Of course, man. So that's Trevor Sikkema, PFF's lead draft analyst, co-host of NFL Stock Exchange, what I think is the best NFL draft podcast out there right now. So for producer Eli, for Trevor Sikkema, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys next time.